Hey guys, I'm Elizabeth McCravey, a website designer and business coach for entrepreneurs and your host for the Breakthrough Brand podcast, the show that's all about pulling back the curtain on how to actually build a successful business. I don't skim the surface around here. If you want a deep dive into the nitty-gritty details of what it takes to run a successful business and stand out in a crowd, you're in the right place. After creating a multiple six-figure-a-year website design business in my 20s, I'm ready to share everything I've learned and everything I'm still learning because I believe the keys to building a thriving business should never be a secret. Here you'll find episodes that are actionable, direct, and fun, like friends chatting business over coffee, and a fresh, honest take on the reality of being an entrepreneur. If you're ready to master online marketing, branding, website design, mindset, and business strategy, then this is the podcast for you. It's time to build your breakthrough brand. Let's do this. Okay, so y'all are going to absolutely love this episode. If you ever feel like you're stuck in the feast and famine cycle of marketing, you do some solid marketing, you book some clients, you do the projects, and now you're back at zero. It's frustrating and not a great way to run your business, but it's definitely hard to make time for our marketing with all the different hats you wear in your life and business. Plus, it feels like every few months, there's a new social platform that's all the rage, hello Threads, and it's just like one more thing to keep up with. So how do you do it all? Amanda Warfield is here today to talk to us about it, and she has so many strategies and tips to help. And this episode is full of strategic ideas to help you be more productive, stop feeling like you have to worry about your marketing every single day in your business, and be more strategic with your content in a way that's going to lead to more revenue in your business. So today we talk about things like how to make time for your marketing when you're really busy, how Amanda makes all of her marketing for the month in 1 week of the month and her exact system for doing this, how Amanda batches 20-ish interviews for her podcast in 1 week, just 1 to 2 times a year, and then she has all the episodes done. And if that sounds amazing to you and you're like, how does someone do that? Do not worry. I ask a lot of follow-up questions about exactly how she's doing this, and that was a really cool part of this episode. We talk about how to plan your batching around your energy levels. How do you stop yourself from getting bored when you talk about the same thing over and over again in your business and in your content? Really good conversation there and so much more. So Amanda is going to introduce herself here in a minute, but a little bit of a formal introduction for you. Amanda Warfield is a simplicity-focused content marketing and launch strategist, author and host of Chasing Simple, a podcast to help creative entrepreneurs uncomplicate their business and marketing. And Amanda and I have known each other online for years, and we've been at in-person events together as well. I've also been on her podcast, Chasing Simple, twice, and she's also an Elizabeth McCravey shop customer and a listener of this podcast like you guys. So it just really is an all-around great conversation I think you're going to love. So without further ado, here's Amanda.
I'm Amanda Warfield. I'm a simplicity-focused content marketing and launch strategist and copywriter, and I help my clients create the copy and the marketing materials that they need. But I also help all of my students learn how to simplify their marketing so that they're not spending all of their time on it, because my mission is to help other entrepreneurs find the time to market their business without their marketing taking over their business.
Yes, I love that. That fits so well with what we're talking about today of like the feast and famine marketing cycle, which I think even without having a definition of that, we hear that and we're like, yes, I can relate to that of like, you market, you get clients, now you're doing the project, and then the project ends, you're like, oh wait, I haven't been marketing, I need those clients again. I know that's my little, definition of it, but can you share like what is the feast and famine marketing cycle that you see entrepreneurs getting stuck in?
I mean, exactly what you just said. It's, okay, I have to get clients. So you spend a ton of time and effort marketing. And then you get those clients and you get really busy, right? And you have all of this, whether I know you love Dubsado, I love Honeybook, whether you have a CRM tool or not, there's a lot that you have to keep track of with clients. And so you're keeping track of everything. You're doing the work that they have paid you for, right? And that just takes up all of your time and your energy. And so you end up forgetting to market. You have it on your to-do list still, but you never get around to it, right? It's always the thing that falls to the bottom. Well, all of a sudden you turn around and you realize you've offloaded all or almost all of your client projects and you haven't had any inquiries. You have no leads because you haven't been marketing. And so you've got this feast and famine where, okay, I've got a bunch of clients. Now I don't have clients. I've got a bunch of clients. Now I don't have clients because you're not consistent with your marketing.
Yes. And this happens in like all different kinds of businesses. my husband and I were talking about in like counseling world, like that happens. Like you get all these leads and then you like get them with counselors and then you have to keep marketing it. Yeah. I mean, we were just talking about that the other night. So I love that. And I know you and I both are very into content marketing. That's actually when I think about my business and like what kinds of marketing I focus on, which we can talk about different kinds of marketing too, but that's been a huge thing for me. And that as a I was also as a content creator, as a business owner who really likes creating content, like being a content creator is like what my like energy naturally gravitates towards, versus like relying mainly on paid ads and things like that. But what would you say content marketing is for someone who's like, wait, I kind of think I do that? Or like, what actually, how would we define that?
So let's take that a step back and first define marketing, right? Because I think marketing is this really vague, overwhelming term for a lot of people. So marketing is simply any efforts or energies you put into getting your business seen and in front of new people, right? So then content marketing is a type of marketing that specifically uses the creation and sharing of online materials like a podcast or a blog or a social media platform or a YouTube channel. Basically, anything that you're creating and sharing specifically online would be content marketing. And the beauty of it, I know you mentioned like you gravitate towards it naturally. The beauty of it for all of us in this online space is that it is a free to low cost way to market your business, which honestly it's a really unique part of content marketing. You can go network and market yourself free to low cost that way, but you still have to put all this time and effort and energy in. You can do content marketing right from your house, which is really exciting.
And content marketing lives on. Like you can write a blog post or record a podcast or have a YouTube video that like gets traction like 4 or 5 years after the fact, and it's still bringing you clients and revenue in your business. So yeah, that's been my favorite thing. And it's just like so fun. Like
Yeah.
I know not everyone necessarily gravitates towards it, but it's really fun. Okay, so when we think about content marketing and other forms of marketing in our business, I know a lot of people listening, like when we think about, okay, why is it so hard to make time for marketing? And so we feel like we're too busy with all the other like 1,000 hats we wear as business owners. So what are some ways we can stay consistent with our marketing even when we're feeling really busy?
So the first way is to do less. We think that we need to follow best practices, right? When we are trying to figure out a new platform, whether it's a podcast or whatever, the first thing we do is go to Pinterest and go, how often am I supposed to put out a podcast episode? How often am I supposed to post to stories, right? And then you get an answer this is the best practice. But we don't have to post to best practices in order to see growth in our business. And that's something that I think a lot of us don't realize, especially those of us that are solopreneurs or that maybe have just one really, really part-time team member. We don't have the man hours to do all the things and to be in all the places and to put out all of the content. So instead of focusing on putting out best practices, focus on putting out less content that's higher quality and showing up on less platforms as well. We don't need to be on YouTube and a podcast and have blog posts and show up on Instagram and show up on TikTok and do email marketing. It's okay to start with less and then build up as you get in the rhythm of showing up consistently.
I love that advice. And I would say the same thing of like for me, I am doing more of the things now, but it's like if I had done them all at once, I would have done them poorly. And what you're saying of like, if you're following the best practices, then you're never going to have time for it all. And you're going to feel like, oh, wait, that doesn't even make sense. It doesn't fit into my schedule. It is being strategic about like recently I decided to try TikTok. And it was like very strategic. Like I wasn't doing it previously for these exact reasons you're saying. I'm like, I know everyone in 2020 was like, we're all getting on TikTok. And I was like, I'm going to like keep focusing on Instagram and on my podcast and on my email marketing. But now it's like, okay, I'm going to try this out because I do have a little bit more capacity for it after getting like the other stuff figured out.
That capacity, right? That's the key is realizing, okay, I have a little bit more mental brain space to take on something else. But instead, what a lot of us do, especially when we're getting started, is we go, okay, where am I supposed to show up and how often? And we try to do it all at once and we burn ourselves out on it.
Yeah. With that, like how many platforms would you say we should be on? I know you can't, like it also depends on the business and things like that, but how many would you say is a good number? Maybe thinking about like social platforms even that we should be actively pursuing.
So if we're talking strictly social, one, start with one. That's always my recommendation is start with one and get to a point where you feel really comfortable and really consistent with it. and you feel like you know what you're doing, you feel like you have a strategy, and then you can add on another that is more experimental, right? Like you have one that kind of runs on autopilot, then you can figure out another one. But I don't want that to sound like, oh, the only place I need to show up is social media, because I really, really recommend that everyone at least is showing up with an email newsletter, if not also a piece of long form content, whether that's a blog, a podcast, or a YouTube channel. But if that's too overwhelming, at least have some sort of email newsletter that's going out, because we've all heard this 100 times. You don't own your social media platforms, right?
Yeah, I love that. So one social platform, and then you would say doing an email list. And do you consider, when you say social, like just to clarify for everyone, do you see like Pinterest falling into that, or is that its own thing?
Pinterest is really its own thing. It's not really content marketing.
Yeah.
It's a search engine marketing platform, and that is just totally its own thing. But it also, I know, is really overwhelming for everyone. So if we're talking in terms of like, so do I show up on Pinterest and social media? Just start with one.
Yes. Okay. I love that. And Pinterest is another one, like we were saying, that like you can pin something and it does really
Right.
well for you years later. But yes, I love the just starting with one and building that up. And that takes a lot of the overwhelm out. Um, okay. With consistency, I know that's something you talk about a lot and you share really well about this. I was literally listening to you talk about this on another podcast, but how important would you say consistency is, and how much content is enough when we talk about like content marketing?
Consistency is key. It is the most important thing that you can do with your content, actually. It's great to have really high quality content, but more than anything else, consistency is going to do more for your business, because what happens when you show up consistently is you're building a relationship with your audience, right? You're building that know, like, and trust factor. And when you show up and you're showing up on a regular basis, and then all of a sudden you drop off the face of the planet, people go, wait, where'd they go? What happened? And if they're expecting, let's say you have a weekly podcast episode and all of a sudden you don't have one, the first time they might think maybe there's a weird tech glitch. Like I get messages all the time on Instagram where it's like, hey, the episode's not out yet. And, I accidentally scheduled it for PM instead of AM, right? People notice those things, especially when they are your super fans. And so the first time they might think, oh, that's a weird glitch. And then when the episode never comes out and it never shows up, and then the next week one doesn't show up, people are going to go, oh, I wonder what's going on. And then we ghost for a while, and all of a sudden we pop back up and say, hey guys, they're going to go, what the heck just happened? I've been waiting for an episode. You didn't tell me you were going to disappear. And it's not that we owe our audiences anything, especially with free content marketing, right? We're putting out this free content for them to listen to. But it's the simple fact that when you're showing up consistently, you really are building that relationship with them. And when you ghost, you start hacking away, you start crumbling that foundation of your relationship. It's like the friend that ghosts you, right? You have a plan to show up for coffee, and you don't expect them to actually show up. You expect them to cancel because they ghost you all the time, or they cancel all the time. That's kind of how you become when you're not showing up consistently in your marketing.
Yeah, that's a great point. And something I want to add to that because some people listening, I know one thing that's true is that people are listening more than you think, but some listeners might be thinking like, hey, no one's listening to my podcast that closely to notice or care. And that might be true, that like you're not going to get tons of DMs if your episode doesn't air at the exact time it's supposed to on the exact day, but people are noticing they might just not be bothering you about it. It's kind of like one thought I would have with that. And also to add, if you're like, okay, you've decided your audience doesn't care and you maybe are disagreeing with everything you just said, which I agree with what you just said. But if people are thinking like, I don't know if I feel that, consistency is also for you. And setting a schedule is going to help you show up better in your marketing versus if you're, say, starting to blog or podcast and be like, oh, I'm going to just kind of like do it when I can. That likely means you're going to be one of the many podcasts that just eventually stops airing episodes because you didn't ever have a plan. So that's where I think deciding on the game plan is really helpful. And with that too, I think something that can be helpful is like doing a minimal viable product concept. If you're not feeling like you can agree with yourself, okay, I'm airing an episode every Wednesday, deciding I'm going to do that for 6 weeks straight and then decide if I want to keep going, or decide, do I want to switch to seasons? Do I want to switch to once a month? Like it doesn't have to be that you're saying every Tuesday for the next 20 years of my life, I'm doing this. It can be an experiment too, but having that like agreement with yourself and with your audience is really helpful.
Absolutely, because it's about consistency, not constancy. And so if you set an expectation of, I'm going to put out a podcast episode the first Wednesday of every month, that's 12 episodes, and that's all you need to put out to show up consistently, right? It's not about, again, we don't have to do best practices. We just have to be consistent. And so setting the tone and letting your people know, hey, this is going to be a once a month podcast, or this is going to be a 6-episode season. And then we'll take a break and I'll let you know when we come back for season 2, right? Whatever you choose that you think you can show up consistently for, great. But you have to make that decision and you have to be realistic with yourself about what that viable product is.
Yeah. Interrupting this episode with a suggestion for the small business owners listening. Ever wonder what you should do for healthcare when you and your spouse are both self-employed, so there's no work-provided health insurance to participate in? Well, when my husband Adam joined me in the entrepreneurial job space over 4 years ago, we joined Christian Healthcare Ministries instead of getting traditional health insurance. And it was the best decision for us, especially in these years of growing and raising a family while also running multiple businesses. CHM is a health cost-sharing ministry and is a faith-based alternative to health insurance. We did tons of research before choosing CHM, and if you know me and Adam, you know we are all about doing the math when making big or small financial decisions. And even though it's not insurance, CHM shares 100% of eligible medical bills, which is more than the typical 70 or 80% of medical bills paid for by insurance companies. All sharing is determined by the CHM guidelines, which you can check out before and after joining. And for the mamas and mamas to be listening, you truly cannot find a better healthcare option for maternity care. I had a vaginal delivery and a C-section and birth center care and hospital care between my 2 pregnancies and births, and it was all 100% shared for. And outside of birth, we've had our share of emergency room visits and procedures as a family, and those costs were all shared by members at Christian Healthcare Ministries, leaving us only paying our monthly contribution. CHM is less expensive month to month than insurance, and because there's no network, you can choose your care with whichever providers best fit your family. I seriously just cannot recommend Christian Healthcare Ministries enough. You've got to check them out. Go to elizabethmccravey.com/CHM for more information. Also putting that link in the show notes, elizabethmccravey.com/CHM. Now back to the episode. And with that, if someone decides maybe they thought to start, I can do this every single week, whether it be an email newsletter or a podcast or blogging or whatever it is, what would you say to someone who agreed that maybe they said I'm going to start 2 episodes a week or 2 emails a week. And now they're like, oh my gosh, this doesn't make sense for me. How do they navigate that? And how do they know when it's this doesn't make sense or it's just a bad week or a bad month and they actually can fit it all in?
So this kind of goes into something that I think we'll talk about later more so, but I really recommend batching out your content and creating the entire next month's worth of content in a week. And the week is important because if you can't fit a month's worth of content into that week, you're creating more content than you're capable of because all of our weeks look different. Some of us are side hustlers and we have 5 hours a week. Some of us work full time and we work 30 to 40 hours a week. Whatever amount of time you have, that's your week. And that means that whatever you can get done in, whether that's 5 hours or 30, whatever you can get done, that's how much you can put out for a month. And so that kind of gives you these boundaries of this is how much I can realistically put out right now.
Yeah. So you're saying with that, the content for the whole month for all the different platforms in a week, being able to do that. Okay. That does feel like, okay, let's talk about that. Let's talk about batching. I feel like there's so many different ways we go with this. I want to talk to you specifically about podcast batching too, but I know not everyone does podcasting, but first, can you share your process for batching? Because even I think about when we first met each other years ago now, I'm I've always thought of you as hey, you do batching really well. And that's one of your things. So I'd love to hear your process for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the thing about it. And the way I teach it is that it really is unique to every person's business. Because like I said, some of us have 5 hours, some of us have 30. And I don't expect anyone's batch week to look exactly the same. So I'll throw that out there, but I'll share what mine looks like. So day 1, whatever that happens to look like, some of my students, their day 1 is a Wednesday and they batch Wednesday to Wednesday. Some of them do Monday to Friday, whatever your day 1 is. Day one is simply creating the strategy and the plan for the upcoming month, sitting down and looking at, okay, here's what I created. Here's what's working. Here's the kind of messaging I want to dive into. Here's what I know my audience needs to hear, what I need to talk about based on my promo and launch schedule, so on and so forth. Here's what I want to talk about. Here's what I've been asked. And you kind of just sit down and figure out what you're posting about and when based on your strategy. Day two is for creating the bulk of your long form content. So whether that's podcast, YouTube, blog, or let's say your email newsletter is your long form content at this time, whatever that is, you're creating that. So you're either writing or recording. Yeah. And you sit down and you record or write all of the episodes or blog posts that you're going to put out in the next month. Here's the thing about batching that we tend to get wrong. We think that batching means that we're going to sit down and we're going to write our first blog post, and then we're going to edit, and then we're going to, make it pretty in format, and then we're going to schedule it, and then we're going to write the second one. That's not batching. That's just creating a bunch of content at one time. Batching, you have to break up by step instead of by piece of content. So day two is all about writing every single post. You're not editing. You're not doing anything else with it, or recording every single episode. Then day three is about editing. So whether you're editing audio, video, or the actual written post, that's what you're doing. Day four is for doing all of the formatting type things and graphics. And then day five is repurposing and scheduling. So what you want to do is you want to take that long form content that you've been creating and repurpose it into your email newsletters, if that's not your long form content, and your social media. So that way, by the end of the week, you're reusing, you mentioned this earlier, right? That's the beauty of content marketing, is that you can reuse this content over and over and over again. You spend so much time on this long form content, let it work for you for longer than you spend working on it. So take that long form content, turn it into your email newsletter, take it and turn it into your social media post. And then you just schedule everything out, and that's all done for the next month. You have 3 weeks where you don't have to worry about your content.
I love that. Thank you for laying that out for us. That's super helpful. And I love thinking about how we're starting with like the way you divided that up, and you explained that really well, of that batching is not just doing one thing all the way through and then the next thing all the way through. It's grouping it together, which also is helpful for us from a productivity standpoint of like staying in that mindset. Can you talk about that a little bit, of how batching is helpful to productivity?
So there have been studies done. There's a study done by Dr. Gloria Mark, where they found that when you context switch, every time you context switch, you lose 27 minutes out of your day. And so batching works really well because you're avoiding that context switching. So when you go from writing mode to editing mode to formatting mode to scheduling mode, you're context switching 4 times there. And so when you're trying to create 4 blog posts and you're context switching 4 times for each one, that math is a lot in my brain. 12 times 30, 6 hours, you're losing 6 hours. It's not even possible, right? That's 6 hours lost when you still have to do all of the work in one day. It doesn't work, right? So instead of losing that 6 hours, if you break it up by step and you're not context switching, you're able to get so much more done because you're staying in the groove, and you're not losing those 27 minutes, but also when you're in the groove, your brain is going to function better and faster as you go.
And when I think about like why we tend to want to do that, of just switching between tasks, it's really like not planning strategically what we're going to do that day. Because I have days like that where I'm looking at it like, I switched between too many things today, and I was losing time and productivity. Then there's other days where I'm like, oh, I stayed focused on that thing and stayed within like task, and I feel more productive and like I accomplished more. But it takes planning to do that, like versus just opening your inbox and like hoping for the best for the day, really planning your day and your processes.
That's so true. And I think that's another reason why batch week works so well, is because you're intentionally setting aside that week as the only thing that you're doing. So you know the week before that you've got to wrap up client projects that need to be done the next week, and any deadlines that are going to come up have to be finished beforehand. And so you strategically plan your time so that I know the only thing I'm working on is batching.
Do you want to discover the driving forces behind every purchase or new client you get? Do you want to transform your marketing game with a fun exercise in crafting irresistible copy? I just created a brand new freebie download that people are already loving, and it is a marketing exercise in a 16-page printable workbook. This is the exercise I've done for years in my business to help me in creatively marketing my services and products in a way that actually touches on the reasons people make buying decisions. You can get this guide for free at elizabethmccravey.com/reasons, short for reasons people buy, and I'll also link to that in the show notes. Don't miss this. It's so helpful and a really fun exercise too. I have two more big batching questions. So one, when we talked through the 5 days, you had day 3 as editing the content and day 4 as formatting it in graphics. What would you say? Because I know some people listening are like, yes, I'm doing all these steps myself. Some people listening, though, also may have a podcast editor or a YouTube editor or someone who is uploading their blog post to their WordPress blog for them. So what would those people do with those days in that context?
Take time off.
I like that. Okay.
You just have
It'd be that you're handing
week.
that over to your team and they're also doing it. Would you say, are you trying to encourage your team members to do it all on those days too, or would they be doing it more at their own pace?
So what I do is I work far enough ahead that I just allow them to do it at their own pace. So for example, if we're going to take into account the people that I outsource to, I record my podcast episodes 2 months ahead instead of 1 month ahead. So as we're recording this, because that sounds really confusing, as we're recording this, it's June. My batch week in June, I was recording August episodes. I hand those over to my podcast editor, and they have until the next month, my next batch week, to hand them back over for my VA to then schedule.
No, I get what you're saying. And that's helpful too. And I think team members appreciate that of versus you being like, hey, I'm working on next week's episode, which is how I am sometimes. Yeah, I love that. Okay, my second big batching question, and this is what we were talking about before we started recording, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to wait so everyone can hear us talk about this together. But for people who are podcasters, which there are a lot of fellow podcasters listening, you were telling me that you tend to do 2 weeks a year of batching your interviews versus, just doing a whole lot of different times. And you really are going all week with interviews. Can you tell us a little bit about that process and how you plan it and how many interviews and all that?
Yeah. So again, the context switching, right? I don't like to interrupt my weeks to have to do interviews for my own podcast. Obviously, it's different when I'm doing interviews like this. I'm happy to do that. But for my own work's sake, I just want to get it done and get it out of the way. And so what I will do is I will choose a week on the calendar, typically about 2 months from when I'm deciding to do it. And then I will start inviting. I roughly invite about 20 people to come be interviewed on my show. And probably should note that I only put out 1 to 2 guest interviews a month. I do guest and solo interviews on my show. And so I only have anywhere from 12 to 24 interviews a year typically. But I'll invite 15 to 20 people. Sometimes people will say, no, I can't make the time for it right now. Sometimes the week that I've set aside conflicts with people and I'm like, all right, well, I'll circle back next time then. But I set aside that week, I start inviting the people, and then I give them a form in HoneyBook to fill out. And then HoneyBook helps me automate all the different steps that I need to here's what I need to intake, here's what I need to send them, here's all my email templates, all that fun stuff. And then I also use HoneyBook to schedule that week. So they're given what they need. They're given the link. They choose a time within that week. I open up my entire calendar for that week. And then everyone just kind of trickles in and finds their place. And then I'm able to go through once everything's scheduled and I have all the guests and just say, okay, this episode's going to be about this. Here's the questions that I want to ask. This one's going to be about this. Here's what I want to ask. And I'm able to just set all of those up in Trello so that when interview week comes, I'm able to just open them up, make sure that I have everything I need from that guest, which is also listed in my Trello. And then I'm just able to do the interview. And that's all I do that week is I just interview person after person after person. And I have anywhere from 2 to 4 to on extreme days 5, but that doesn't normally happen, interviews throughout the week. And so each day is a little different. It just depends on how their schedules work out, but I just spend that week interviewing.
And do you prep extra days then? So it's like 5 days of interviews, but is there an extra day for prepping the questions ahead of time and then also for post-production at the end? I know you have an editor, but even like post-production, you're a part of like maybe writing show notes or recording an intro and things like that, or ads and stuff.
So what I'll do is after each interview, while I'm doing the interview, I'll take notes and then I will put any of the notes and any of the links mentioned inside of that Trello card right after it's over. And I will write the introduction immediately so that I don't forget what we talked about. And then the batch week where I'm preparing for whenever said episode is going to be coming out, I'll record the interview then because I always mention the interview number or the episode number in the intro. And so I wait to actually record it till I know what exact episode it's going to be. But then I pass it off to my VA for show notes and my editor for the actual edits. So I do it all then. And as far as preparing the questions, I typically do it the week before, like the Friday before I start that batch week.
I love that. And yeah, just to clarify too, to make sure everyone heard what you just said, this podcast batch week is separate from the content batch week. And it's feeding into that content batch week because some of these episodes are your long form content that you're working through on day 2. Also, the advice you just gave of writing the intro right after you record the episode, seriously, so wise. Like everyone who has a podcast needs to do that. I do that as well. And I often, for me, it's going to be that I'm doing the same thing you just said. I write the intro. I write any random notes of like, oh yeah, we got to make sure we cut that thing out. Or like, this was the, like at this second, I literally wrote on my sheet of paper as we've been talking at 17:06. That's a clip. I'm like, I want to make sure we make that into a clip. So I will make sure to like note that in my notes. But then I also am recording the intro itself closer to time. But if you wait until when the episode is going to air to record the intro, you're not going to remember. And you might think you will because you're like, oh, I love that interview. I don't have that many interviews. But it's going to be so much harder and you're going to find yourself having to re-listen to the episode and you don't need to do that. It's a waste of your time to like re-listen to it right before then.
Well, exactly. If you want a quality introduction to an episode, which you do because that's how people decide if they're going to keep listening, you need to have details in it, right? And if you don't write down what those details are that you really loved about that episode, it's gone. By the time you sit down, especially for me, if I'm doing it months later, I'm going to be like, I know we talked about email marketing, but what did they say that I really loved? I don't have a clue. I don't remember anymore.
And one more batch question with podcasting. Do you ever worry that it's not going to feel relevant when you record something and now it's airing like 20 weeks later?
Yes. So I'm very intentional about making sure the topics I choose are evergreen topics so that they're not something that's going to become irrelevant or that is timely. / if there is something I want to talk about that's really timely, like I don't remember what episode it was, but I put out an episode about creating content using AI right after my latest guest batch week, which was back in February at this point. But I made sure that, okay, this one's timely. It's going to be one of the first ones to come out after this batch week.
Okay. So putting it earlier. And do you like try to make sure guests aren't saying like, we're talking right now in February, and then it's going to air in August, or do you just let that be whatever it is?
No, I don't care. All of my listeners know that I batch all of my content.
I guess it is like, why hide it if this is like such a great way to do things? Yeah. And just to like echo more of what you're saying about batching, I was telling you this before we started recording, but like I used to be more like, okay, I'm going to like do a few podcast interviews on this date. And with me being on other people's shows, I even have started to try to batch those a little bit of like picking like on someone's calendar a day, like, oh yes, I'm already doing an interview that day. I'm going to do another interview right before it. So grouping those things together, because it helps you from your productivity standpoint of not switching tasks, but also you're not just like constantly having your time taken away to do random meetings, even though it's very important for your business, whether it's on someone else's show or your own, it's really helpful. But like for me today, as we're recording this, I'm doing 4 total interviews, which is about like my personal max, it feels like. But then I am so intrigued when I hear you saying doing like 20 in a week. I just don't know if I can do that without being exhausted. But that's back on like personality differences and how your energy is. Yeah.
Okay, but I will say it is exhausting. Let's be clear. But for me, it feels worth it because I only have to do it once or twice a year. And so that's how I view it. And the same is true for batch week. Inside of my course, I tell my students, you're going to be tired after batch week. That's why the only thing that you should have on your calendar is batch week. But the benefits are worth the exhaustion for that 1 week, because when you only have to create content once a month, you have 3 weeks where you can work on moving the needle in your business. You can work on those client projects. You can rejuvenate that creativity, because that's another issue we have if we're just constantly creating, is we end up really burned out. That creativity is just gone. You have that time for your creativity to renew, right? And so then when you come back to your next batch week, you know what you want to talk about. You've got things to say. And because your content has been running in the background for you for the last month, you still have clients. You're not in that feast and famine cycle that we were talking about earlier.
I love that. And with the batch week, both like the podcast batch week concept and the just content that you're putting out, how do we choose on our calendar what week makes the most sense for us? Do you have any tips there of maybe like thinking both from an energy standpoint for ourselves and the like calendar month?
So as far as the calendar month, it really just depends on what you prefer. What matters more than when you do it is just that consistency of making sure that you put it, like, I really encourage everyone who's listening right now to today go mark off batch week for the rest of the year. Choose a week and stick to it. There are going to be times where like, oh, I normally do the second week of the month and we're going to be on vacation. And so you move it up a week, and that's not a big deal because you're going to be consistent. But if you don't set aside the time for batch week, it's not going to happen. And then you're not going to be consistent. So when you do it on the calendar, doesn't really matter. If you are a female listening and you are tracking your cycle, it's always great, I think, to try to match it up with one of your higher energy weeks, particularly if you're doing YouTube or a podcast. However, if most of your content is written, if you do it when you're in a lower point in your cycle, it may not be a bad thing because you're not going to be showing your face. You can just sit on the couch and do all of it if you really want. So I guess that kind of is a consideration. What kind of content are you creating? Do you need to be able to be more energetic? Or is it okay if you can just kind of huddle behind the scenes and, not have to get ready and not have to be really front facing that week?
Yes, super great advice. That's what I was thinking you were going to say, is that concept. Because you don't want to be like on your period and doing like 20 interviews that week. Like that's probably not what you're after, but it could feel cozy to maybe sit on your couch and write blog posts. So I'm totally with you. And that's something that can be hard to like plan for, but is like you're saying, if you're mapping this out, you can kind of like estimate and maybe get that right on your calendar. I love that. Okay, let's pivot a little bit talking about our content still. So I know I personally have struggled with what I'm about to ask you about, and I know listeners have as well, but we can get bored with our content because we likely have a focused thing that we are selling, hopefully, or a few different things, but something that causes us to talk about the same thing over and over again. For me, it's like talking about website design would be one thing. It's like, I talk about that a lot, talked about that for like 8+ years, and it can start to feel boring at times, maybe to us, because we're like, I've already said that. Everyone's heard me say this before. How do we stop ourselves from getting bored with our content and our topics?
Okay, I'm so glad you asked this question. Going back earlier, you asked what were the 3 ways that we can stay consistent, and I shared the first one, and then we went down rabbit holes. Oh, yeah. So the first one was doing less. The third one technically is batching your content, but in this case, it was the second one. The third way is to become a broken record. I want everyone to just, in your mind for a second, think about your best friend. When you think about your best friend, what is the first thing that comes to mind? For me,
consistency. I do think of that as one thing. Is that what you were going to say? Or am I just like off there? Okay. No. I do think of that best from being consistently there in my life, though.
But I do love that. No, what I was going to say is, so for my best friend, I think of California because she's from California and she talks about it all the time. All the time. And every chance she can fit, in and out or the beaches or the weather or whatever into conversation, it happens. And she's not doing it to be obnoxious. She just loves it. And so it naturally comes up. I know that when people think of me, they either think of Disney or they think of my cats because I talk about them all the time. The reason that you associate these different things with people, whatever it was that you thought of with your best friend, is because they consistently talk about it over and over and over again. They're a broken record about it. So To your question, how do we not get bored? You're going to get bored, and it doesn't matter because your content's not for you. Your content's for your audience, and they need you to talk about it over and over and over again. I've been talking about batching for 3 years now. Does it get boring? Yes. Do I have to sometimes really dig deep and go, okay, how can I say this in something that, doesn't feel like I'm just repeating myself? But the thing is, you are, because when you think about it, your content's not for you, right? But also, such a small percentage of your audience sees any given piece of content that you put out. I don't have real numbers for this. I have not been able to find them, but let's say that for any piece of content you put out, 5% of your audience sees it. That means that you need to talk about something 20 times before everyone even sees it, in theory, right? On top of that, you've got the marketing rule of 7, which means that someone needs to hear you talk about something 7 to 10 times to take action on it. So you have to, that 20 times 7 to 10, in order to have your people actually hear you enough to take action on it. So you have to talk about something 200 different times before your people are even going to go, oh yeah, I should probably join that course, or I should probably sign up for that service, right? We have to talk about the same things over and over and over again.
Are you looking to upgrade your website without redesigning everything from scratch? Because, hey, you can improve things without starting completely over. If so, you need to check out my Show It add-on templates. In my template shop, you'll find podcast pages, sales pages, a landing page bundle, and the all-new quiz template and speaker page template. These templates can be added to any Show It website in just a few clicks and integrated into what you're already doing, which is pretty sweet. When you purchase, you get access to tutorials where I'll show you exactly how to set everything up and customize your new pages with ease in under an hour. So go to elizabethmccravey.com/shop to see all the add-ons and the full site templates as well. Now, back to the episode. Yes, I totally agree with you. And I love how you said that our content is for our audience, not for us. And with that, it's it does feel easy I had a realization with this maybe a year ago where I was feeling like I kept wanting to talk about completely new things on my podcast, which I still do, right? But it's I can talk about the same things. It's not like, oh, you did an episode on episode 5 was on that topic. Now you can't talk about it again. It's no, people are discovering you at all different phases. And most people, whether it's a podcast or Instagram or whatever it is, they're not going back through every single thing when they're new. They're looking at the latest. And there is a way to take different angles of it.
Well, they can't. It's just, look at the Breakthrough Brand podcast. You have 200 plus episodes. There's just no way for someone to go back and listen to all of them. And so the ones at the very beginning, they're going to probably hear, because you'll have people that'll go back to the beginning, and then you'll have people that'll start from the new stuff. But the stuff in the middle is definitely getting ignored. And you can always do a retake on something. So I know there's a couple from my first few that I'm like, man, there's so much more I would say about this now because I've grown and evolved as an entrepreneur. So you can go back and go, I talked about this on this episode, but we're going to expand on it today because I have new thoughts. And so you can always reuse and repurpose content because people aren't seeing it all. There's just no way.
I love that idea of going back and revisiting an old piece. And you don't even have to announce it to your audience that this is your retake on something. I actually did that with, I'm not going to know the episode title, but some listeners might have heard this one about an episode about affiliate marketing not that long ago that was it was 3 ways to make more money as an affiliate. So y'all can go back and listen to that episode. But no one probably noticed that was one of my early podcast episodes. On that episode, though, I only shared 2 ways. And it was very similar. I explained them slightly different, but it was 2 ways on that episode. And I had a 3rd way now because, in however many years, I've changed that up some. But it was a great thing for me oh yeah, I love that topic. I think I've talked about this before. I couldn't even remember if I'd done an episode on it. And I looked back, I was like, oh yeah, I have talked about this, and revisiting it. And that can be so helpful too, if we're not only bored with our content, but if you're feeling burnt out with it, of I don't even know what to say anymore, looking at some of your old stuff that maybe did well, but you'd approach differently, or it did well and you're okay, new people need to see this too.
Well, and it goes back to that idea earlier that I said of you want your content to work for you for longer than you spend working on it. So go back to the stuff you've already created and see how you can literally reuse it. because you spend a lot of time on it. It takes hours and hours to create any given piece of content. So reuse it over and over and over again. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And it's, people think, oh, well, my audience will notice or they'll get bored. But how many times have you reread your favorite book or rewatched your favorite movie and found something new? I know that there are books that I read every summer over and over and over again. And every single time, I've done it for 10, 15 years now. Every single time I find something new, because the more we listen to or watch or read something, the more we find.
Yeah. With that, how would you maybe tell someone directionally how to pick old pieces of content to repurpose? Maybe let's talk about like Instagram or TikTok type of content. And when we repurpose it, do you think it should be that we're reposting it exactly as it was, or like changing, like using the same concept, but changing like the video and the reel and that sort of thing?
I think that depends on how much time you have. So there are two different instances where you would really think about reusing and repurposing. One case is where, let's say you planned for a batch week and then your toddler ended up sick and you're like, I don't have time to do a full batch week. That's a great time to literally copy paste content that you've used before and just reuse as is. And it gives you a chance to put up stuff that has already gone up so that people can see it again without you having to sit there and go, I've got to create something totally new. On the other hand, maybe you're in that I'm feeling bored and I don't really know what to talk about. I don't know how to say this in a fresh new way. Maybe in that case, you go to something you've created before and re-upload the same text with a different video, or the same video with a different text kind of thing. So in that case, you might have more capacity to change it up. But in the other case, if you just don't have the time or energy, or batch week doesn't happen for some reason, you just copy paste and use as is.
Yeah. And talking about podcasting again, you can do that with podcast episodes, re-airing an episode exactly like it was originally, but with like a fresh intro, maybe even trying a fresh title on it that's a little bit of a different take from the original, but telling people like, hey, this originally aired this date. I'm re-airing it. You don't have to say why, but just like, thought it was a really great episode. Thought you might enjoy it again. Yeah, I love
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
So in your new book, which it will have, talking about batching, because I know ish when this episode's going to come out, it will have just come out like a week or so before this airs. So you have a new book called Chasing Simple. And in it, you talk about the 3 phases that we as business owners go through with our content. Can you tell us a little bit about those 3 phases and like explain a little bit?
Yeah, so it's actually the 3 phases of a business journey. And then within that, within the book, we talk about what to do with your content within which phase you're in, because there are so many marketing strategies out there, right? We talked about that at the very beginning. There's 101 different things that you can do, even within content marketing. And what a lot of times we can end up doing is we see someone try something, and so we want to try it. We see this other person trying something, and we want to try it. And we end up trying all of these different marketing strategies and just kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall, and we end up overwhelmed and not seeing results because we're not getting strategic. We're just throwing something out there to try it. So an entire section of the book covers, okay, if you're in this phase of your business journey, these are the type of marketing strategies that are going to work best for you. If you're in this phase, these are so on and so forth. So just a little background for everyone. But the first phase is the content creator phase. This is a phase that actually not everyone goes into. I know you started your business really intentionally. You knew you were going to be starting a business. I, on the other hand, I knew I was starting a business, but I didn't really know what my service was going to be. I didn't have any clue what I wanted to do, other than I knew I wanted to create a business from content. I knew I wanted to start a blog, and eventually that was going to make me money. I didn't know how. So some of us start in that content creator phase where we're just figuring out how to market ourselves. We're just figuring out how to create content and how to turn that into a business. Then you've got the foundation builder phase, which is where some people start, where I want this ish to be my service. I don't know exactly what it'll look like in the future, but I know that I have this specific skill and I can turn it into a service or an offer. And I'm going to figure out what is that first offer, and then what are my other core offers going to be, whether that's moving up the ladder or moving down the ladder. And then the final phase is that established entrepreneur, where you know what your offers are and you're just really focused on honing in on those offers, honing in on your messaging, honing in on your customer journey, and working on getting seen in front of more people.
Oh, I love that. And can you tell everyone about where they can get your book and all of that?
Yeah. So if you just go to Amazon and search for Chasing Simple Marketing, it'll pop up for you.
I could do a whole other interview with you about like writing a book, honestly, because I have a lot of questions. I know we're like about to be done in time, but it is like, that's so amazing. And I know really exciting for you. And I'm excited about it for you.
Thank you.
Okay. So some rapid fire questions to like close this out. What is your most unpopular opinion about marketing?
You don't need to worry about the algorithm.
Oh,
Stop trying to figure out what the algorithm wants. Stop trying to post at the best times. Just stop. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't. And the algorithm wasn't created for you. It was created to make the owner of said platform rich. So stop focusing on it because it's a waste of your time.
it's a good take. I like it. What do you spend a like maybe quote unquote silly amount of money on in your life, but that's something you're like, oh, I love spending money on that and it's worth it to me?
Food.
You relate
Um,
to that.
we love to eat out. Food and Disney. I spend way too much money at Disney. It's bad.
Yeah, which that's my next question. Which okay, everyone should know you have a Disney like travel planning agency. We haven't even talked about that, but that's so cool and like unique that you have these two different businesses. But like, what's a like Disney tip you could share with people about planning their own trip or just being at a Disney park, all that kind of stuff?
It's much more enjoyable if you're not trying to do it all, which is very on brand, I guess.
Yeah.
Most people, when they go to Disney, they feel like it's a once in a lifetime trip and they need to do all the things, but it's not possible to do everything that Disney offers. And it's just much more enjoyable if you take it slow instead of trying to pack it all in.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay. And that last, well, actually, I have one more question for you. It's not on here, but what would you say to someone about getting a template for my shop? Because you have a few that you've used for your website. So what would you say about that?
They're beautiful and they're so easy to use. I mean, I have a main website template. I have the quiz template, landing page template. I feel like there's another one that I literally just
I know.
bought.
I'm trying to think.
Oh, the
I know.
speaker one.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say. I noticed you bought those when they came out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was like, oh no, I need all of these. Immediately purchased. No, they're so easy to use. I mean, I originally bought a website template 2021, maybe end of 2021. I don't totally remember, a while ago, and set my whole website up. It was great, awesome. And then I finally invested the money in a professional brand because I had been struggle bussing with one I put together 5 years ago, which was it was terrible. And I went away last month, actually went to Disney for a week and holed myself up in the hotel room there and completely redid everything with the new branding. And it was just so nice to have your templates because over the however 2 years since I originally got it all set up, like I've changed things out. And it was just really nice to be able to go back to the base template and go, okay, what is this supposed to look like? How can I make it go back to what Elizabeth did and then put the new branding in so that it looks clean and that it looks right? And I'm not a visual person. Anyways, I could go on and on about True Templates, but if anyone wants to chat more about them, I can sing their praises in my Instagram DMs if you want.
I love that. And I love that you went to Disney to work on that. How fun of a like an inspiring place for you. Yeah, to be like working on that. That's awesome. Okay, the last question I didn't give you ahead of time. You're like such a like avid reader. I mean, I know we're friends on Goodreads and your like book goal is like 100 this year. You're already at 51. I think I was looking at I love looking at what other people are reading because it gives me ideas. I look at your profile. It's like Amanda's reading 6 books right now. And she just finished reading these other like 10 books. So you read a lot. So I guess it's kind of a 2 question, but like how, for someone who's like, oh, I'd love to read more because I love reading. How do they make time for it? And then also, what are you enjoying reading right
Okay. That's
now?
so funny that you knew that. So I do a lot of reading in the cracks of the day. So like a lot of those times when someone would typically pick up their phone to scroll TikTok or something, I'm picking up my Kindle instead. So, when I'm eating breakfast or I'm eating lunch and I'm sitting there by myself, instead of scrolling on my phone, I'll just pick up my Kindle and read a couple pages.
And you're reading on an actual Kindle, not on your like iPhone? Or
On
do
my
you do
Kindle,
both?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I have, I mean, sometimes I'll do both because sometimes when I borrow books from the library and I run out of time, I have to stick my my Kindle on airplane mode.
Gosh, I do that all the time. That's such a good hack. I literally finished a book yesterday that I read most of it on airplane because it got taken from me.
Yeah, I don't know if that's like okay or not, but I do it.
Yeah,
It's so sometimes then if a new book comes in, because I always have fiction and nonfiction going, and of course the fiction gets consumed a lot faster. So sometimes I'll read that on my phone, but normally I just have my actual Kindle. And then I read, to fall asleep each night. I don't know. I spend a lot of time reading. It's my go-to hobby for sure.
And are you reading any audiobooks or is it all like mostly Kindles?
No, it's all like reading.
Yeah,
with my
that's
eyeballs.
crazy. I mean, I'm impressed and I love it and I'm inspired because my book goal this year is way lower than yours, but Goodreads tells me I'm like 6 books ahead. So I'm like, yes. And it is so fun. And I also mostly am a not audiobook, but I have done a few audiobooks this year and it's been fun like trying that.
I definitely for me, I think reading's a coping mechanism. So anytime I'm like stressed and need to like just be done with stuff, that's what I do. I just retreat and I either go sit in the hammock or I go to the bathtub and take a hot bath and read. Like it's a coping mechanism for sure. So it's like, how healthy is that? I don't know.
I know you like rereading stuff too, which is fun. What's a favorite read though? That was my other part of my question that maybe you've read recently. If you can remember even off the top of your head. It's okay if you can't.
It's funny because my husband will walk in as I'm reading something and ask what I'm reading. And I don't know. I do so much. Right now I'm reading Rest is Resistance and I cannot remember the author's name. And that makes me feel terrible, but it's so good. And it's all about how, we are taught in this capitalistic society that we have to just grind all the time. And I personally have had some health issues because of that. And because I have issues with finding my worth and my work and my productivity. And so it's been a very eye-opening and enlightening book.
Okay. I'll have to check that out. I did see that too when I was looking at your profile. So okay, I wonder which one she's going to say. Yes, that's awesome. Okay. I loved this end of our conversation. Will you tell everyone where they can find you and best places to connect?
The best place to connect would probably be over on Instagram. I'm at Mrs. Amanda Warfield. But if you want to know more about what I do and other, marketing thoughts that I have, the book, Chasing Simple Marketing, or my podcast, Chasing Simple, would also be 2 great ways.
Yes. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I loved this. I learned a lot, and I'm sure listeners did as well.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode all the way until the end. I appreciate you being here. And if you enjoyed this episode, then I want to invite you to check out my website template shop too. Over on elizabethmccravey.com, you'll find show it website templates that are easy to use, strategically designed, and created to help you book more clients and customers. Maybe your current website is really boring. Maybe it's a challenge to update, and maybe even it's that thing that you really feel like is just completely holding your business back. Your website needs to be strategically and intentionally designed in order for it to convert your viewers into raving customers, and that's exactly what my M-Shop templates do. So these are pre-made show it website templates where you can plug and play your content into it with ease and then get started with a website that's designed to actually help you make more money. These templates are designed to be SEO friendly on the back end, and they're not just pretty, but they are very strategic and with all the strategies I teach on this podcast. And best of all, they're easy for you to set up all by yourself. So shop them at elizabethmccravey.com/shop and come join the M-Shop family of hundreds of happy customers. And as an added perk, you can use the code BBPodcast at checkout to get 10% off any template as a thank you for being a part of the podcast family. So that's BB Podcast for 10% off any template over at elizabethmccravey.com. And if you love this podcast, don't forget that you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts so that you never miss an episode, and leave a rating and review for the show wherever you're listening. Share it with a friend, share it on Instagram or Facebook. That's a great way to support the podcast and get the word out. All right, I'll be back next week with another new episode.